Karen Parr and I were having lunch one day, and I do not remember the year. I think it might have been 2002 or 2003. And we were having a lunch with a glass of wine. She had just experienced her parents' death, both of them, after having lived for a period of time in a transitional home. And I had just experienced my parents' death under the same circumstances. So we were talking about what would have made their lives and deaths better for them and for the family, and their last years more alive. And so we got to talking about what some of those specifics would be. And then we decided, wouldn't it be fun, wouldn't it be exciting if we could invent something new? And we decided that we probably could and should do that.
A friend of ours, who was also a retired teacher, had recently been looking for a place to settle in her retirement years. She'd just lost her husband, and she did not want to leave Fairbanks because she had grandchildren around here, and she really wanted to stay here, but she didn't know where she could live. And so that summer I took her around and we looked at everything, and that's when I became aware that there's nothing in Fairbanks for people except the very, very poor, for seniors that except very, very poor. They had senior housing for them, but people with a pension, such as we had, weren't allowed to live in those places. There was always Pioneer Home. But the Pioneer Home, which is really very nice care, used to be mostly independent living, and now it's mostly assisted living, and 80% of the people have dementia. So it's not as much fun as it used to be over there. We thought it was a place, a real need in Fairbanks, for some place for independent living, for people who are able to take care of themselves, basically, but would be sheltered to some extent and have meals and social activities. And there was nothing like that actually in the whole state of Alaska. First of all, the two of us pretty much agreed on the kind of a facility. Her parents had been in a place in Minnesota which was very nice, and they'd liked it very much. My parents had been in a place in Fresno, California, that was similar, larger, but the same idea, and they had loved it. Both of them, at least my parents, had gone in there kicking and screaming. They did not want to move out of their farmhouse. And once they got there and got settled, they loved it, and they wished they'd done it much sooner. And so we knew the kind of place we needed. First of all, we got the manager of the place in Minnesota that she knew to come up one weekend. Paid her way up to come for the weekend and tell us a lot about how these places were run, what they required. And Mary Lou Drahoda, I think her name was. And she did that. Then we also went to a local developer and asked him what he thought. It was a hotel and restaurant developer. And he was very nice to us, but he said it was not feasible to build a place like this because the costs, the overhead costs are so high that none but the very rich could afford it. So we thought that over, and we also visited some places in Anchorage. Another friend and I went to Anchorage and spent a few days looking at everything in the southeastern area there, Anchorage, Palmer, Wasilla, in terms of senior housing, to see what we could see there, get some ideas. And we decided that the way to go, and we started the local meetings. We began by having a public meeting in the mayor's office. The mayor very kindly offered his conference room.
This is the borough mayor?
The borough mayor, Jim Whitaker. And he gave us that much support, and we advertised it in the paper and just said, anybody interested in talking about senior congregate living in Fairbanks? And we got a few people, And the next time we had a meeting, a month later, we had a lot more people. And pretty soon we had people sitting on the floor and standing around the walls, and we were making so much noise we were disturbing the mayor's staff, so we had to get a bigger room. So we met with the public, the public was invited, every month for 10 years. All the time we were developing Raven Landing. And we got the input and reactions to our plans and suggestions for plans and policy discussions. That group picked the name, by the way. We thrashed out the pet policy. We thrashed out the smoking policy. The next year, after we started this, we incorporated as a nonprofit, as Retirement Community of Fairbanks, and began operating with a wonderful board of directors we handpicked from the community.
And I both got very involved in a problem-solving way in that process. Me more problem-solving, Karen more out in the community trying to convince people what might happen. And we, at this point, had already run into our partners, the people who were our partners in this endeavor, and one of them was C.B. Bettesworth, who was invaluable. Another was Glenn Gellert from Anchorage, who is a developer who works with Alaska Housing and public housing issues a lot. Another was not right from the beginning, but soon after the beginning was the mayor, Jim Whitaker, yes, and who was, after the first period of time where he was cautious, he was so supportive and so warm and so helpful and so full of ideas, and he became part of what moved us forward.
That made for a success here, and that was the way we organized the governance of our organization and the board of directors. We took a lot of direction by observing the hospital, how the hospital got built and how it has been sustained. And one thing that's been extremely successful in avoiding huge political controversies that get all out of hand and destroy an organization, which can happen with nonprofits, is the way they organized their governance, and we copied it. We selected, handpicked the two of us, our first board of directors, and chose people who were well-known individuals in the, real well-known leaders in the community that had particular skills to contribute and who caught the fire of this mission, were attracted to it and excited about what we're trying to do, and willing to devote a lot of time and work to it.
And
We had many, and still do, have many volunteers. Probably the most important group of volunteers were the people who met with us essentially every Thursday at 4:30, I think, over a period of maybe 5 years. They were people who were interested in the development as a potential residence. They were people who were interested in the development as a community, a community focus. They were people who were interested in the development perhaps by way of their own, some issue that was individually going to be interesting to them, perhaps even a profit motive in some cases. And so I would say, this is a guess, but I would say that there were about 50 people from the beginning until the time that we actually knew Raven Landing was going to be have a community center and apartment buildings and be a residence and a social, central social gathering place for seniors and the community. So those people were extremely important because we talked to them almost every week.
Oh, well, Mary Ann is a really accomplished politician. She really knows the ropes in politics. And I had been in local politics a little bit, but not that expert. But I'm a good talker, and I think I brought my main contribution was just talking it up to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I went around town and making speeches at Rotary and Lions clubs and legislative assembly, the city council, anybody who would listen for 5 minutes. I was out there holding forth on why we needed this center.
And Mary Ann's contribution was?
She really knew, had a very astute knowledge of how to run a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew how to raise money, and she knew how to use the best people's best gifts. And everybody's got some kind of gift, and she was very good at that.
Karen is a charismatic human being. I am a person who has, I was one of those people that Obama gets criticized for being a community organizer. And so community organizers have certain sets of skills that are not necessarily shared by people who are charismatic. And so my skills had more to do with bringing people together, giving a message that would be appealing or enticing, figuring out what to do next and how to keep momentum going, that kind of thing. And Karen's skills are to entice and impress, and to also think about what will be good to happen next. So we're very different, but when we have the same goal, it meshes well.
Well, there were obstacles, of course, and we had many moments when we wondered if we were nuts in trying to do this, but most of the time we thought, this has got to be done. We need this so much, and there must be some way we can do this. The first big obstacle was finding a place for it. We wanted it to be right close to the center of town. Many people advised us to get land out from town, out in the, a few miles from the city center, because it would be much cheaper. There's plenty of land available. But we wanted to be right in town for several reasons. For one thing, we knew that our residents, many of them would not be driving or would stop driving during that time, and they would have to get a lot of places on foot. And for another reason, we wanted people to be able to come and see us a lot. We wanted families to make it very convenient for people to drop by, and for families to take us home for the weekend or take us out to a play or something. We also knew we need about 5 acres for the size of a place that we had figured out we probably needed to make it viable in the long run. And finding 5 acres in the heart of Fairbanks was pretty hard. We did a lot of wild goose chasing for about 2 years looking for a place. It was Brian Rogers that suggested the Fairview property early on, and we tried to talk to the owner of that about getting a piece of that, because part of it was boarded up at that time. We thought maybe we could buy that piece, but he was not interested in selling a piece, and he wanted way too much money for the whole thing. We couldn't raise that kind of money at that point. Finally, we decided to ask our architect, which was one of the early things we did was to engage the most imaginative architect in town, who had done many beautiful public buildings, because we wanted our place to be beautiful.
And who is that?
And that was C.B. Bettisworth. We asked him if he could make a coalition with some developers to get that Fairview land. And he did. He joined with a developer in Anchorage, a couple of developers in Anchorage, and one in Idaho. And that together they had enough money and enough firepower. And it took another 2 years, or at least a year and a half, I think more like 2 years, for them to come to an agreement with the owner of those old buildings. Well, certainly nobody thought that they could get any state money directly from the legislature at that point, although I began lobbying the legislature about the project early on. And from about, I think, 2004 to 28, I went down there 4 years in a row and lobbied the legislature. And maybe it was 2005 to 2005 to 2009 maybe. And so they knew about it, but there was no money coming our way. But we did find out about the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation because developers are quite used to working with them. And they eventually put together a proposal for a building. We wanted 96 apartments and a community center. And they said, oh, no, 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 no. We would consider a proposal for 20 apartments. And so they did, and actually we got it. And it took another 2 years, but the first building got built with 20 apartments. And then after that, a second building with 20 apartments, and a third building with 20 apartments.
Many people said to us, this is grandiose. I mean, you are not thinking straight here because what you're dreaming of is not available, won't be available. It quickly became clear that we were going to be running into political walls and barricades and
Like what?
issues. Well, one of the first ones was, where would this facility that we were beginning to envision, where would it be built? And of course, Karen and I, and the people who were working with us, were looking at the best places in town, the most desirable pieces of property, the pieces that would contribute the most to what it was we were thinking of, which was spacious grounds for gardens and walks and spacious enough areas for parking for friends and relatives, enough areas for storage for the people who would be living in the units in an apartment that might not contain as much storage as they would like to have. One of the first properties we looked at was on the Chena River, and it was a very desirable piece of property, which had not sold yet because it was caught up in some issue, political or real estate or something. And when we said, this is the property we want to go after this, it's located where we think a senior community should be located, people all over town said, no, you don't, because it was a very desirable piece of property. And the idea to think that senior citizens would be there, to some people in the community, was anathema. I mean, there were people in the community who did not believe that senior citizens should have what was a desirable piece of property. We were shocked. We had not expected that kind of perceptual difference. And so we were convinced after a while that this was not going to be our place. And so we continued to look around and finally came back to a place that we'd thought of originally, which was Fairview Manor, right across from the library, in a nice, location that was, we thought, ideal. But there were political issues there too. There were political issues because the property was was leased by the current operator, not owned. The city council was involved, so there were deals that had to be made through the city. There were developers interested in that land, developers from Anchorage. I don't think there was a developer from Fairbanks that was interested. And so we had other parties that we had to deal with. And unraveling all that was fascinating, difficult, demanding, and exhausting. We discovered that people were not interested in buying these apartments, even though they said they were originally. They were much more interested in renting them. But this took about 6 years for us to discover. An idea that we'd originally had did not follow through to the end of the process with the same priority for the people that we were regularly talking to. It was money that we were convinced over and over again was going to derail us. Because as we started looking at what we were talking about, we became overwhelmed with the price tag. The time that I knew that we probably were going to be able to do this was when the legislature, this was on our fourth year, that we had gone to the legislature. We told them about the community center. We said, we need your help. This will happen. The community has already done this much and this much and this much. I mean, we'd raised almost $1 million in the community. And we said, but we need your help. And the reason why this is a statewide, of statewide interest is for these reasons. And in the fourth year that we tried, the legislature said, okay. I mean, we gave us $1 million. Gave us $1 million for the community center. It was more than we had. I mean, maybe not more than Karen had expected. But in terms of my expectation, I mean, I've been in politics a long time. Getting money from the legislature, particularly the legislature we had then, it was not the easiest thing in the world. And so it was then that I realized that it was probably going to happen. And that was very exciting. The things that we had hoped for came to pass, and in addition, more than we had realized came to pass.
If we'd had our druthers when we were planning this, the dining room and lounge and everything would have been part of the big building that we wanted to build. The 96 apartments, they would have been strung out a little bit and separated so it wouldn't look like a hospital. But the lounge and dining room would all be centrally located for the residents. Well, there was just no way we could finance that. Alaska Housing Finance, their rules didn't allow for anything of the sort. In fact, they even objected to our wide hallways, which we had because wheelchairs had to pass each other, and our large rooms, and which are large because every single apartment is wheelchair accessible. It's all ADA accessible. And so that's called common space, and the hallways and passages and entries, they had to be large for our purposes. And this violated their standards, because their standard of housing was all of the money went into apartments and not too much in hallways. Their standards were not set up for seniors. And so we couldn't find any way around that. The HUD rules were even stricter. They absolutely would not fund a building with a dining room in it. I mean, it was just a complete prohibition. And so we had to fund that community center as a separate building. And getting money for that meant it couldn't just be for the people living there. it needed to be something that would serve more people than just the residents. We envisioned it as being for all seniors, particularly in the community. And then we developed the idea that in order to fund the operation of it, it might be a place where people could rent rooms and we could provide catering from our kitchen. And that proved to be a really good combination. That has helped quite a lot with the expenses of running it. But it all was sort of necessity. It was born of necessity. And it's worked out. I think we're the only place in the country that I've heard of that shares its residential living space with the whole town. And it's been wonderful because we get all kinds of people through there. The military has used it. We've had weddings there. We've had memorial services there. We had a high school prom there, and we're having another one this winter. It's just really fun. The thing that's most exciting to me, besides it's a beautiful building, more beautiful than I ever could have imagined, because we had such a good architect. But the thing that really makes me happy is to see how happy the residents are. And
It's the best place I've ever lived.
Correct.
at the very beginning, Mary Ann insisted that before we did anything else, we agreed on a set of values. That's one of the first things we did because of your pushing. It probably wouldn't have occurred to me until much farther along. And we do. We have a very distinct set of values. One of them is respect and care, genuine care for every individual, no matter what they are, what they look like, what they think, what their behavior is. Every single person is deserving of our respect and care.
And Karen and I are of a generation. I mean, she's a little ahead of me, but not much. And it's a generation that was the beneficiary of all the wonderful activist accomplishments of the 30s and 40s. So we believe wholeheartedly in Social Security, and we believe wholeheartedly in organized labor, and we believe wholeheartedly in opportunity for people for free speech. We were one time together in an organization that was founded particularly to dissent from the Patriot Act. I mean, we had a lot of fun doing that, and there were a lot of interesting people that we never would have met otherwise doing
for
that.
sure.
So we are of that generation that values both civil liberties and intellectual endeavor. And I think you can see some of that here. And those are, I mean, in addition to the values that Karen talked about, those are the values that I hoped would be here and would continue here, because those still are inspirational ideas to me.
And to the new people coming in. We really, one thing I'm very proud of here is that we feel that the fewer rules there are, the better off everybody is. And so there's not a rule here, but has been thought through carefully and deemed absolutely necessary for us all to get along and for everybody to be safe.
What I know and what I glean from talking to people, I would say, surpasses my expectation.
Absolutely.
Because I did not believe, really, and I tried not to say it out loud very often, but I did not really believe that we'd be able to pull off the community center in the way that you see it today.
Yes.
I mean, I wanted it to happen, and I loved, I mean, the original plans, had a par bar on an upper level with access to the roof, That was our original dream. But of course, that didn't happen
That didn't
because
happen.
of money.
Yeah.
It
There's a
would have
par-
happened if we'd had the money.
There's a par stage.
Yeah, there's a
Well,
price.
and we do have a wine and beer licensed, so that we can not only have wine or beer at our meals if we wish, but also serve it at catered meals, which is a big deal in terms of making some money off the catering. And that took all last summer.
So, just let me finish what I was saying, that it more than exceeded that the apartments are wonderful, and they are pretty much as I had hoped
Yes.
they would be.
Yes.
And as far as I know, the services that we're providing and the ideas that we talked about early on are here, and people are benefiting from
They're
attention.
enjoying that,
And
yes.
they're enjoying it. But as far as the community center, I am in awe. And this morning when I walked into that library with the fireplace and the books and that beautiful bookcase and the spaciousness
And those wonderful, comfortable chairs.
and
Yes.
Randy's painting overlooking it all, I just about cried, because most people anywhere don't get to have such a beautiful place
Yeah.
to relax and to be, and here it is. And so I'm in awe of the community center, really.
Well, I am too. It turned out, as you said, way better than I thought possible. And it went through so many different iterations. I mean, we scaled it down from the original ideas. It was going to be a story and a half with a big atrium full of hydroponic garden and so on. None of that happened. But what did happen was not only more affordable, but more functional. And this is a place where every single square foot on this whole campus is accessible to handicapped people.
Yes, which is
And
wonderful.
everything is wheelchair accessible. Every closet, everything. And I think that's really important. I was surprised by how many people coming in here from the beginning have been in wheelchairs or requiring walkers. Because we were thinking of it more as an active old age. Well, it still is. I didn't know people in wheelchairs could be so active. They're very active.
Yeah.
And the thing that has surpassed my expectations is how the residents have joined in the spirit of the thing. It always takes a little while to get adjusted when you first move in. But these folks, they're all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds. They have gotten right into the spirit of helping each other, of having a good time, lots of joking and carrying on at the meals and elsewhere, lots of playing, but they also work. They volunteer to do, there's some people volunteer to do the recycling. Oh, it's hard work to do that. Gather up all the recycled stuff and get it somewhere. Other people volunteer to help with the decoration and the finishing of the center. All that beautiful conference room, now called the Founders Room. That was the result of a lot of people working on that design, and both the equipment and the beautiful part of it. All the comfortable chairs, all that bookshelf, all different people, not me, all sorts of people involved. And that's what's exceeding my expectation, is how this truly is a community. It's not an apartment building per se, it's a community. I don't see how. I would have had a very one-sided dream, and Marianne added a completely different dimension, and also she had her dream, to which I added. Is that right?
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm sure somebody else, 2 other people or 10 other people could have created using the resources that were available in the community, which were hard to find, by the way. could have
You mean the financial resources?
financial resources and resources such
Support.
as support and
Yeah.
enthusiasm. I mean, we had enough to carry it on our own.
For a while. Then it came.
And then, yeah, when we were fundraising for the community center, that was at the beginning of
Yeah.
that fundraising, that was the hardest part.
Yeah.
But there were several times when I looked at Karen and Karen looked at me and I said, should we throw in the towel? And she said, absolutely not. Or she would look at me and ask that same question and I would say, absolutely not. We are going to finish this. This is going to happen. And she had that same determination. So neither one of us were willing to say it's too hard or there are too many variables or there isn't enough help. The creation and construction and all the things that went along with it of Raven Landing is one of the most satisfying things I've ever been part of.